Bang, bang. What's going on, guys? Hope you guys are really excited about this interview. I really enjoyed it. I think you will as well. But before we get into that, make sure that you like this video so that more people on YouTube can find it. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And don't forget that BlockFi is the sponsor today. They've got 3 products you can buy and sell crypto on their crypto exchange. You can deposit crypto and earn up to 8.6% APY in an interest-bearing account, or you can deposit crypto and take out a US dollar loan against your crypto collateral. You can use the description right here, or you can go to blockfi.com/pomp to learn more. All right, let's get into this episode. I hope you guys enjoy this one. All right, guys, bang, bang. I've got Michael here. Thank you so much for joining me, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's just get right into your background before we talk about Fireblocks. But where did you grow up and what did you do before Fireblocks?
Yeah, sure. So grew up in Israel, and I guess fairly typical for an Israeli entrepreneur. I actually spent the first 2 decades of my career in cybersecurity. I actually started in that domain when I had to do my mandatory service in the Israeli army. So I was working for the Israeli Cyber Command about 20 years ago as part of my military duty over there. And about 10 years ago, I started my previous startup that was focused on mobile cybersecurity. So if you guys remember the days where people were buying iPhones and Android devices and they would come to work and ask the IT to connect those devices to the network, or to get emails and documents, something that is like completely trivial today. When that happened about 11 years ago, the IT guys will get a heart attack and will freak out. So we built the first platform to basically secure those devices from cyber attacks, and work with a lot of the Fortune 500 companies. And about 4 years into that venture, we got acquired by a company called Checkpoint that is one of the biggest cybersecurity vendors. I was running their mobile and cloud security portfolio, so basically their transformational unit that was supposed to take them from traditional IT infrastructure into modern age. So I've been there for 3 years, and then basically there was something quite interesting that happened in 2017 that basically drove us into crypto, into this super exciting world of the new finance.
What was that interesting thing?
So early in 2017, there was a hack in South Korea that basically $200 million worth of Bitcoin disappeared from 4 exchanges in South Korea and reappeared in North Korea. So there was a pretty significant hack over there. And part of that hack was actually done through mobile devices, because we had the best team in the world in terms of doing investigations around mobile forensics. We assisted in that investigation. And I've seen a lot of bad things happen to many people or many organizations through my career, but you rarely see people lose $200 million overnight. So that was really eye-opening for me. And I basically went down the rabbit hole and started to talk with a lot of the financial institutions or crypto fintech companies that were operating in the space to understand what are the gaps they have, why that happened, and sort of understood the lack of infrastructure, I guess, that we had back in 2017, 2018, which really attributed to a lot of those hacks and to all the crypto that was lost in the last decade. So that basically what happened, and I think it was really what drive us into this space to come and to fix a problem that initially I think we thought that it's just a bit very fundamental operational security or cybersecurity problem, but eventually what we discovered is that we are much more of a fintech company that is basically builds the plumbing for how crypto can flow.
Absolutely. And so if we kind of talk through Fireblocks, maybe walk us through the evolution of the business, right? So kind of what was the original idea, and then kind of how has it grown over time with the product suite and a number of the things that you offer to customers today?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I guess the product or the fundamental idea didn't change much since we basically contemplating what we're trying to solve. So the idea started from a fairly simple observation that there was lack of, I would say, secure hot wallets that are suitable for institutional usage. So that was problem number one. And problem number two that we recognize is that Actually, the problem is not always with the storage or with the wallets themselves. It's actually how do you remit or how do you send the payment? Because it was very evident that when you're sending a big transaction, when you copy paste the address, you basically, there are like 5 seconds where you get a heart attack, right? That you don't actually know if the crypto, I think like when you press refresh on the block explorer to see if it's actually going to the address on the other side. And some of the first customers we started to work with were Genesis and Galaxy and some of those big OTCs that were doing hundreds of transactions per day. And it was very clear that this is a huge problem for them. And I guess, when we thought about how the space is going to evolve, I think we had in our mind something that looks like how it looks today, right? That there is big money flowing around, like, left and right and at scale. And this need to be solved. So we basically created a very secure hot wallet offering, which we call the Fireblocks Vault, that is based on multi-party computation with hardware security. And the second part, which we are, I guess, most famous for, is the Fireblocks network, that is basically serving like this institutional authentication layer, or basically the SWIFT for crypto, for institutions to make sure that they authenticate each other from an address standpoint. That was, how we started. With time, I think it evolved to a much more comprehensive offering, which is almost like a crypto backend as a service. So any financial institutions, whereas that, hedge fund or OTC desk or market maker or payment provider or bank or exchange, they need to basically set up like a full stack of services that goes from a wallet to settlement to compliance to reconciliation, and then to the more advanced use cases like DeFi and staking. And now Fireblocks is basically, more or less that, I think everybody would like to give this comparison, but a bit like the AWS for if you need to do crypto, basically a platform where you can activate different components and start sometimes from something that is very basic, but then just like activate more and more components and essentially take advantage and, sort of bootstrap your business into then full speed where you do everything possible in crypto.
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to talk about today is just like the comparison between the legacy financial infrastructure and then what you're building with Fireblocks and kind of digital asset infrastructure. Some of it is similar and there's a lot of comparisons, and then some of it is very, very different. And obviously you and I believe that some of those differences are advantageous compared to the legacy system. So maybe what we could start with is just the similarities, right? So when you look at the legacy system and the digital asset system, specifically what you're building with Fireblocks, what are the similarities between those two systems?
Yeah, so I think that to a certain extent, there will be similarities in terms of the participants in the market, right? I think that many years ago, people would say, a few years ago, maybe there was like a notion that crypto is going to disintermediate everything. I think that we realize more and more that that players that own the end user are probably going to stay, right? So you will have neobanks and banks and payment providers that will still basically hold the end customer relationship, and they would basically provide some kind of wallet services or account services. I think that this is pretty much I don't think that eventually it will be that, or for the foreseeable future, I don't think that the entire world population will work with ledger nanos in their pocket, unfortunately, I guess. So I think that part of the market's infrastructure will survive. And then you will also have the market makers that need to basically supply liquidity to interact with the different protocols. So I think that the perimeter of the environment is going to be pretty much the same. What's definitely going, or I hope, that what's going to basically be changed is, I think, two things. One is the counterparty risk and the transparency that people have into actually what's going on behind the scenes. And the second aspect is sort of some level of disintermediation or, flattening of the pyramid of trust that exists, inside of the ecosystem when it comes to just having, today there are just too many layers that, eventually constitute a lot of eventually a lot of risk, right? A lot of dependencies that on normal days they work fine, but on a bad day when the market is stretched, they break, right? And when they break, there is sort of this ripple effect that goes through the market. And eventually, by the way, it propagates to the end user or to the end customer.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about the big differences, right? So obviously, similarities are clear, and did a great job articulating those. What are the major differences, and why do you feel like the digital assets and Fireblocks system is superior or advantageous compared to kind of legacy system?
Yeah, so I think that there are basically two, the base layer. I think there are two components that should be significantly rethought, right? The first one is what is really the concept of custody, right? Or account management in some ways. And the second concept is basically, around the settlement or the clearing layer, or basically how do you connect or how do you move the assets between in the marketplace. So for the first part, we were very, I guess, we developed probably, or we progressed a lot, the utilization of this idea of using MPC, basically multi-party computation for wallet protection. But beyond the math that goes around and beyond the security, actually one of the advantages aspects of MPC is that you sort of remove the counterparty risk and a single point of failure and the trust that you actually need to put in the party that is servicing you. So that party can still be your, backend. They can still enforce some of the policies, but at the end of the day, from a sort of a final operation risk. So for example, our customers, if Fireblocks goes down and disappears tomorrow morning, their crypto is safe. There is a way for them to recover it, right? Whereas if you look at other custodial models, that is actually not the case. And that also forces us to basically operate in a very different way, right? So all the accounts are segregated, right? We don't commingle things. And at the end of the day, what people see in our UI is also what people see in their address on the blockchain, right? And those things are actually fundamentally different from the way that the traditional system works, where you will have an account in a bank is just like a top ledger that represents something that you actually don't have any idea what's going on behind it, right? It can be full reserve, it can be partial reserve, it can be 10% reserve, it can be invested in a lot of different things, but eventually you don't have any idea what it actually represents beyond what you see in the UI. So that's I think component number one. I hope it makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. And so, I want to talk about certain aspects of the crypto industry. And I figure I can kind of just throw a topic out there, and then you can give me an update in terms of what are you doing at Fireblocks, and then kind of how do you think about the overall kind of subsector, if you will. And maybe the place that we could start, we are recording this on the day that BNY Mellon is announcing all of their custody and kind of the oldest bank in America. And they're talking about everything from Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and digital assets. One of those I likely think will be stablecoins. How do you think about stablecoins for your business? And then how do you think of it from a kind of industry sector that seems to be getting a lot of attention from the legacy world?
Yeah, so I think that actually also relates to the second part of the question of why it's different and why people are excited about stablecoins. So I think that at the end of the day, one of the really fascinating things here is how stablecoins are going to disintermediate people like Visa, right? In my opinion, right? And I think this is some of the reasons why you see Visa and MasterCard sort of rushing to figure it out. Because, and I'll just tell you our personal story. So we accept payments from our customer. It's basically a monthly license or a quarterly license that they pay us, and those are pretty high numbers, right? It's in the thousands or tens of thousands, right? And usually before we start to use stablecoins, so nowadays basically 30 or 40% of our customers are actually paying us with stablecoins. They're paying us with USDC or Paxos. That's basically what we accept. But before that,
50%, just so we're clear, 50% are?
Yeah.
50. Wow, that's a very big number. Okay, keep going.
Sorry, somewhere between 40 or 50%. I'm not sure exactly, but more and more, we're actually pushing more and more of our customers to pay us with stablecoins, and we'll get to the point why. Right. So before we started accepting stablecoins, we were basically accepting either Wire, ACH, or Stripe. Right. And then at some point, and Wire, ACH, they're reasonably cheap, but it takes you, for ACH, it takes you 24 hours until it clears into your bank account. And for Wire, like basically Wire, international Wire, takes 3 days, and occasionally it being lost, like, somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, and you never get it. And, people need to figure out in which bank your payment is stuck. So it's more inconvenient, but it's not like awfully expensive. When it came to, but at some point, basically, we had a customer that told us that they want to pay us $30,000 over Stripe in a credit card. And my sales lady asked me, hey, can we process that? I told her, hell no, I'm not paying Stripe like, $1,000, which is like 3% of the transaction, right? And as a commission for getting a payment. So we told them to basically send us it in USDC. And it's really convenient because they're basically sending it over the Fireblocks network. But in reality, like, what I was supposed to pay to Stripe for, like, $1,000 commission and hopefully get it clear after 48 hours, we paid, I think 50 cents. Like back in the days, the ETH price was low. So we probably paid 50 cents on the transaction, and it cleared within 5 seconds. And basically we sent it to Coinbase, off-ramped it using Silvergate into our bank account. It was just magical, right? And once that happened, we basically told all of our customers, we basically put on the invoice, this is the Fireblocks network ID, pay us in USDC and PAX, and we're trying to push more and more. Now, then comes the question about ACH and Wire, and the thing is that because it's truly digital, you can actually build automation, right? So you can build hooks in terms of getting those payments and reconciling those payments. You can look at the blockchain. You can use DeFi, so we're actually depositing it into Compound, and we're getting a pretty significant interest. If I'm trying to basically put it as put it and deposit in my Silicon Valley bank account, we're getting 0.25% interest rate. When we deposit the USDC, clearly, depends on the day, but it's orders of magnitude higher. So, overall, I think that stable coins are just this phenomenal thing. And I think that the traditional players, they see it. They also essentially need it regardless of their specific initiative, right? So whether they're planning to do Bitcoin custody or they're planning to basically tokenize securities, they need a settlement leg. And that settlement leg has to be digital, because digital in a sense that it has to run on blockchain, because if it's not running on blockchain, it actually reduces all the beauty of why they're doing it, because they basically want to do atomic swaps, which they call DVP, but basically those are atomic swaps. And that just reduces the counterparty risk between those institutions. And it's very, very, very meaningful for them.
Got it. And so if we talk a little bit more about DeFi specifically, how do you see either your existing customers, like where is the demand for the DeFi products? And then how do you think about what is centralized versus anything decentralized that either you're interfacing with or things that you guys are building?
Yeah. So, personally, I'm really a big promoter of, DeFi. And, I think that this is definitely the biggest promise of crypto. But I don't think it's definitely one of those areas that are emerging. Funny enough, we released our support to Compound literally a year ago. I think it was beginning of February 2020, and no one cared. We had a press release. I think the only publication that covered that was The Block. And even on that article, we had some of our customers that basically commented, yeah, we're not going to use it. And then May came and liquidity mining started, and it basically, I think, propelled initially I think everybody thought that it's just like a speculative activity, and once the liquidity mining will dry, it will basically disappear, and things will go back to CeFi. But I think the most exciting thing is that it's here to stay. So people continue using it. Now I think it basically moved the market to be much more acceptable, and people understand the risk. That they also understand how to use the tools. And maybe the most important thing is that it really built the on-ramp into those protocols, or at least like from my perspective, the institutional on-ramp, because it forced us, and to be honest, like also some of our competitors, to really devote strategic resources to create institutional browser extension, APIs for DeFi. And now our customers can basically securely access anything from Uniswap to Curve to Compound, Avi, any of those protocols. And the amount of interaction that we're seeing over there is overwhelming. So when we released our initial set of capabilities around the generic capabilities 2 months ago, we thought that it's going to be a niche use case, and we'll have 5 or 10 customers that are going to use it. Like 90% of our customers basically want to use it. So that's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And so when you think through the most surprising thing that's played out over, let's call it the last 12 months. So obviously we've had a public health crisis. We've had massive kind of government and central bank intervention. Most of the crypto industry has exploded in growth from a user standpoint, from a value transaction standpoint. I'm going to go on a limb and say Fireblocks has done very well during the last 12 months. But what's been the most surprising thing to you as all this has played out?
I think that the most surprising thing was actually how, there are two things. One is the propagation into mainstream, right? I mean, of course, it basically tied to the health crisis that is tied into the concerns from inflation. But 12 months ago, and again, we always played in the what we call the crypto native space. So those are like our core customers, BlockFi and Celsius and Genesis and all the folks that we know and love. And we were also very close, or at least we were trying to work with all the big banks, right? In the big banks, it was always sort of they were interested, but it was unclear to when they're going to do it or why they're going to do it and what's going to be the trigger. And of course, there was always like, the regulatory concern that was basically an element that no one had nothing. Like there was, you were sort of like at the mercy of the regulator, right? When are they going to approve it? So I think that at the end of the day, the triangulation of those three things, basically I think the overall transformation, then the real, I think, economic force behind, behind why Bitcoin and why cryptocurrency important. And then I guess surprisingly, basically the timing with the regulatory clarity from the OCC and the SEC eventually is what sort of drove almost like the speed in which those banks have changed from, it's sort of like a niche group of, in their innovation department or a few folks that they have like a VP of blockchain, to a mainstream conversation where literally like, the number 2 or number 3 in the bank are driving. And this is for them the most important thing, not only the banks, but also, you see it with MasterCard and PayPal and all those big players. That for me, the fact that it happened so quickly, it's really surprising. I would expect that this will be a really gradual process that will take maybe 2 to 3 years. The fact that it basically happened literally in their, I guess, speeds, overnight, I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah. And talk a little bit as you kind of think through, the customer base that you've built. You're serving as kind of this amazing infrastructure. How big is this, right? And I know that it's a little sensitive in terms of like what data points you want to share or you don't want to share, but just like what can you share with folks that they understand just kind of how much of a critical piece of infrastructure you guys are becoming?
Yeah. So we now have about 200 customers in our space. It's always hard to say how much is that, from a percentage standpoint, but it's decent, I guess. And interestingly enough, we have a lot of big. I mean, I don't know if the big guys, but we do have the mid big guys in the space that are using us and partnering with us. And just to give some interesting numbers, in the last 30 days, to be honest, I didn't check today because I assume that things have changed overnight. But in the last 30 days, maybe 31 days, our infrastructure was responsible for about $80 billion of on-chain settlements. That sort of represents somewhere between 3 to 5% of the overall on-chain transactions. So I think it's already quite decent, in terms of what you see as a market activity. I think one of the things that we continuously think about is how to make sure that we are not becoming a critical risk, right, for the industry or for the market. And we have quite of interesting approaches over there that we're going to evaluate in the next 12 months.
For sure. And then when you think through like the obstacles to the business as you continue to grow, what do you see as the largest obstacles or challenges? Is it something that's internal in terms of scaling and just building, or is it something that's external that you've got to be aware of, but might actually be outside of your control?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the interesting there are a lot of challenges, to be honest, because we are really scaling quickly. At the beginning of, 12 months ago, we were 30 people in the company, and now we have over 90, or maybe we're approaching 100 people, right? So scaling like threefold in 12 months during COVID was not an easy task, but hopefully we've managed that well. And also from a customer standpoint, clearly making sure that all of our customers are happy and they're getting the SLA and the services that they need. And, we do serve as a really critical component for them. That's also a challenge to continue and perform. But strategically, I think that we are at this point where the market and the use cases open up, right? It's almost that every scaled company right now can be everything for everyone, right? So you don't need like specifically Fireblocks as an example. You can also even look at players like Coinbase or BlockFi, that you can see how diversified they are, right, in terms of the use cases that they are serving. And same applies for us, right? We have use cases that are around trading, and we have use cases around payment, and we have use cases around prime brokerage, and we have use cases around lending. And now, there is this amazing use case around treasury management for corporations, and there are use cases around cross-border remittance. And one of the, I think strategically for us, the challenge is really how to navigate and how to time which one of those pockets we want to go after and address at every given moment. Because eventually I believe that you need to have the right product, and you need to, have a quality product to serve a specific niche. So timing it and putting the resources is something that I see it as one of our challenges for the next, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. And in terms of kind of the macro environment of the industry, talk a little bit about how you see this collision course with Wall Street, right? Is this a world where they're all going to capitulate and they have to support digital assets and it'll coexist alongside the legacy world? Do you see it completely disrupting them, and they're eventually all going to be built and playing on top of like open decentralized protocols? Just when you kind of zoom out from just Fireblocks and you think industry and you kind of meet Wall Street, at some point in the future, how does that play out?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I've always been sort of a strong believer in very disruptive innovation, right? So I think that people always think that people underestimate how long it will take for the change to trigger, and they always overestimate, they don't really able to understand how quickly that change, when the change actually comes, how quickly it's going to disrupt them, right? And traditionally you've seen it with companies like IBM and Blockbusters and others, that basically it took way longer to something to happen, but when it happened so quickly that they just couldn't react. So I think that overall, this change is actually going to happen, fairly quickly for them. I think that some of those institutions will be able to react and accommodate. So I guess they will be the Microsofts of the world. The cloud it will be a disruptor for them, and for some period they will lag behind AWS or Amazon, but eventually they will be able to catch up and they will become as powerful as them. And I think some of those guys will be the IBMs, and they will basically, over time become less and less relevant because they won't be able to modernize their infrastructure. And by the way, the modernization of their infrastructure is really, really deep because, just to give like stupid examples, if you for their systems to even deal with the precision that you have with Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? Basically 6 digits, right? Precision, right? They don't have systems that know how to do it today, right? Basically, they need to re-platform everything, including the web interface of the bank. So as you can imagine, some of those guys will not be able to catch up with that at all.
Yeah. What is the thing that you're spending the most time thinking about as we move forward, right? You founded and run one of these critical pieces of infrastructure. What keeps you up at night right now? Or like, what are the 1 or 2 data points or milestones that you're looking for from an industry perspective?
Yeah, I think that there are 2 things that are keeping me up at night. One is, or maybe 3. The first one is just day-to-day operations, right? That, to make sure that we, as I said, everything functions properly, right? The system is up and running, and all those things work for our customers. The second is really the strategy of sort of how to make sure that again, there is sort of like the 5 years strategy, but also there is like the 12-month strategy of how do we really go about the newest players that are coming in, right? Like the fintechs of the world, the neobanks, that clearly all of those guys are going to move in the next 12 months, and they're going to provide services. So for example, Revolut is a customer of ours, but it's also very clear that all their competitors are going to do something in the next 12 months or so, and we need to basically be ready to set an infrastructure for them. And the last piece is actually talent, right? So hiring and scaling and making sure that we have the best talent there is in the company is also something that, as a CEO, is very important for me. I'm like a strong believer in the A player brings in an A player, and B player brings a C player. So fundamentally, the reason why we were able to execute so quickly was because we have great people, and as we scale, to maintain it is always something that you need to be very thoughtful of.
Absolutely. Before I finish up, I always ask everyone the same 3 questions, and then you'll get to ask me one question to finish up. The first one is, what is the most important book that you've ever read?
Professionally or personally?
Either one, whatever comes to mind.
I think, personally, one of the best books that I read is Catch-22. And
why?
I think, I read it at the period that when I was sort of like, toward the end of my military service, and it sort of like, changed my perception about the world, and, I guess some of the, things that we the perceptions that people have about how the world works, and but like what really matter, and like how I guess how we perceive things that are absolutely not the real truth, right? That was basically and it's sort of like it goes about in a very sarcastic way, right? So that was basically, I think, one of the most interesting books that I read. It was like 20 years ago. And I think, professionally, probably a book called Four Steps to Epiphany, which is really like a Bible of how to develop product and, achieve product market fit.
Absolutely. Second question is more personal. Sleep schedule. I've been using the new 8 Sleep thermoregulated bed. I used to be like a 5-6 hour sleeper. Now I basically sleep like on an ice cube and get much better sleep. And it's been like life changing for me with the 8 Sleep stuff. But what is your sleep schedule, and how has that kind of changed over the years?
So I guess before I had kids, I would sleep like 12 hours. I really like to sleep. Nowadays my 5-year-old unfortunately comes in the middle of the night and kicks me for the rest of the night. So I wish I could say that I have a 6-hour sleep. But maybe I should bring a big ice cube, and then he will stay in his bed.
I love that. Last question is more fun. Aliens, are you a believer or a non-believer?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that, real aliens, green aliens that come to visit us, or if there are other forms of life.
Whatever you think.
Yeah. So I think B, I definitely, I studied physics. So I definitely believe that B is definitely a good probability that there is another life form in the universe. Area 51 conspiracy theories are, I guess I think that after I stopped watching X-Files when I was 16 or 17 years old, I sort of dropped that conspiracy theory.
I love that people now have to say, are we talking about green men or not, right? When they talk about aliens, because people are getting smarter about the whole thing. What one question do you have for me to finish up?
Actually, that's a good question. So aliens, what's your view?
I've talked about it a million times. So I think that there's other intelligent life that exists somewhere in the world, but it is so far away that you and I in our lifetime won't come in contact with it. Which, okay, kind of calls into the question, does that mean that they actually exist or not, right? If we don't get to engage with them, then maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but maybe our grandchildren will have some kind of crazy technology that we'll be able to propel them through wormholes, and they will be able to meet them.
Absolutely. How can we find people to find you on the internet, or where can we send people to find you on the internet, or find out more about Fireblocks?
Yeah, sure. So on our website, fireblocks.com, and LinkedIn, pretty active there. Michael Shaulov.
Awesome, Michael. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I think people are really going to enjoy it. You've built some amazing technology and a great company, and I hope that you keep going, and we'll have to do this again in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Anton.